You're listening to the Australian Hunting and Beyond podcast with Matt, where we talk about hunting, shooting, fishing, camping, and everything else that the great outdoors has to offer. Let's get into it. Hey everyone, Christmas is fast approaching, and if you haven't already, get over and check out our merchandise store. There is a heap of new products that have been uploaded. So if you're chasing something to give a loved one or just interested in buying something for yourself, head over. You can find it by just searching Australian Hunting and Beyond Linktree, and it's the first tab at the top. Go over, check out the products. I'd love some feedback. The other thing is, if you haven't gone over and checked out Final Press, definitely get onto that. I know it's coming into camping season and the Christmas holiday break is just around the corner. It makes an ideal gift for anyone who loves their coffee and when you're out and about. So head over, check out Final Press, use the code AHB podcast to get 10% off. All right, let's get into this one. It's all about hunting in those trees. Okay, there's been a couple of missed starts for this one, but finally got you on whips. I'm keen because you do something not a great deal of people do here in Australia, and that is hunt out of a tree saddle. Welcome to the podcast, mate.
Thanks, Matt. Nice to be on, long time listener, first time talker.
Mate, I am really curious because it's something that makes a lot of sense, and I don't see the take up here in Australia as much as somewhere like the US. So do you want to give people a bit of an overview of how you like to hunt using a saddle? Because you don't use the tree stands, do you? You go for the tree saddle?
Yeah, I do. Basically just came from, I'm fairly new to deer hunting only in the last year and a half, 2 years. I guess like a lot of people came out of COVID and just the shortage of food and things and just decided, I grew up on a farm. We used to shoot rabbits and foxes and things like that for pocket money. And I used to eat rabbits when we were kids and then sort of disappeared into a different world, traveled the world for years following the ski industry around. And haven't really had a firearm for a long time. And we came out of COVID and my wife sort of said, she's like, because quite a lot of our friends, we live in an area where there's a lot of hunting possibilities and a lot of my friends do hunt. And I just thought, I'll get my firearms license and my game license and go and have a go at chasing deer around the bush. And it proved to be nowhere as easy as I thought it would be. And as I'm sure listening to your podcast over the years, you've found, but yeah, so we are smack in the middle of Samba country. That's the only deer that we have in the bush here. So I don't have fallow that I can call in on the rut. So hunting's a lot harder here, I think. Basically, and especially when you get into the summer months, it's hotter and obviously everything's dry. We've all been in the bush when it's noisy. And that was something that was really just starting to kind of give me the to be honest. I was going out and making more noise than I wanted to. So, and I watch Meat Eater and, I see a lot of the videos, whether it's Cam Hanes or whoever it is. And, just as you do, you get into a sport and you start to watch a lot of stuff like that. I watch all the Aussie stuff as well. It's great. But, I really just saw these guys and they were hunting out of trees. And I thought to myself, I don't see why that wouldn't work here. And I hadn't really heard of anyone doing it. And then I was reading Errol Mason's books, his trilogy of Samba books, have you read those?
I haven't. I've got a mate who is going to lend them to me to have a bit of a squeeze at because it's probably just a bit out of my price range at the moment, but I hear just amazing things. I actually want to try and get down and do a course rather than probably buy the books, but we'll wait and see how that one pans out.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, Errol, I'm sure there's 50 hunters like Errol who've just been doing it since early days and they just have so much time in the bush that they have the experience. You could read those books 10 times and you would never take it all in. There's so much information that it blew me away. But Errol has a whole dedicated chapter on tree stand hunting.
Yeah, right.
So it's not a new concept at all. Guys have been hunting out of tree stands in the bush for a long time, but I think predominantly guys have been building a stand in the bush and going back to it and using it. And I've found a few in the bush out hunting, you'd be walking around, looking around, and then all of a sudden you just like you just notice unusual shapes, especially when you're looking for deer, and you find a little platform in a tree with some, couple of steps nailed on, like we used to do with a cubby house. And yeah, the more and more I thought about it, I thought, this is a way to go, because you can just sit still and quiet and sort of let the deer come to you, so to speak. And I just did a bit of research, and at that stage, I was working for a mate of mine who's an arborist. So, and I did a little bit of climbing with him. So I'd been in an arborist saddle, I guess you might call it, but it's a harness. Saddle's just a harness. It's just a lightweight version of a harness. So I'd sort of been in trees working as, I guess, an assistant arborist, or working as a groundie, and then doing a little bit of climbing. So the concept didn't seem that foreign to me. And I had all the equipment that I think I would need that I could borrow off my friend, who's the arborist. So that's basically what I did. I just hit him up and said, hey, do you have a spare harness I can borrow, and a rope and a few things? And so I went out in the bush, I did a bit of research on the internet, watched a heap of YouTube stuff on the saddle hunting that they were doing in America. And a bunch of my buddies thought I was crazy. It was quite funny. I was hunting with a rifle. So I went out, set up in a tree where I thought. I got there at about 3:00 in the afternoon, got up in the tree. I didn't even have a proper platform like what I use now. I just found a tree that had just a nice branch that I could put my feet on. And I was about 20 feet up this tree in a little gully system that I'd hunted a few times. And I wasn't there an hour before this sort of medium-sized stag and a hind came walking up the gully towards me. I just couldn't believe it. I was like, oh my God. And they had no idea I was there. I had a really comfortable rest with the rifle, and I shot that stag from probably 60 meters out of the tree, dropped dead on the spot. And to me, it was just proof of concept. It was like, well, this works. It's not hearsay. It's not someone said this, someone said that. I've actually gone up a tree and shot a deer, and now it's in my freezer, and I want to do more of this. So I just went down a rabbit hole and learnt a bit more about it.
I mean, that's cool. Firstly, to get out there first go in, I'm guessing it was on public land?
Yeah, everything I do is on public land. I do have access to some private property, but I don't know why, but I like a challenge. So I like the idea of hunting. Yeah, we're surrounded by state forest. We've got millions of acres of state forest in my backyard. And, the deer are out there, as I guess some people think they're a pest causing damage. I don't disagree. I don't think that my hunting is going to vastly reduce the numbers, but it certainly helps. So, yeah, no, I'm happy to go out and do that. And, I'm sure it's a total fluke that I shot one my first time up a tree. Prior to that, I spent hundreds of hours in the bush hunting and had only killed 2 deer to that stage. So, it's one of those cases, like any form of deer hunting, you learn your local area, you look at the sign, you look at the weather, you look at all the things, and you kind of anticipate where the deer are going to be moving and when. And the thing with sambar is they don't follow a routine. And I know you've spoken to a bunch of guys about sambar deer hunting, and they really don't follow a routine. Like, you might see them there one day and they're not there the next day, and you can't really keep going back to the same spot and expecting to see them. But, there is a general area, and I think you could walk in there on the right day and there'll be a deer there and you could shoot it, and it would seem really easy. But you could go back there the next 50 times and not find one. So it's a case of, there's a percentage of luck, but you've still got to be in the right place, with the right conditions. The wind's got to be right. All those things have to be in your favor. And then you've just got to have a deer walk under you.
Well, I mean, everything you said makes sense to me from a theoretical point of view, because when you are talking about sambar being the only ones you can hunt down there or around your local area, they are such a switched on animal. Growing up around tigers and sort of having that just head on a swivel, they pick up everything. So hunting out of that tree stand, tree saddle, it makes sense because you're up out of their vision. And I know it's like humans. If when we are just operating in our day-to-day life, it's very rare that people are looking above eye height, up high, so you can walk past and not see anyone. Then I see the other side as well, where you're very much helping yourself if it's with wind and moving your scent around because you're now further up the ground. Obviously, you have to get into the tree and get up the tree. But the reality is, once you're up the tree, that scent, if the wind's changing or whatever, you're hoping that it's not going to be pushing down and spreading too far to sort of give yourself away as well. So there seems numerous benefits to being able to hunt out of that saddle. How, for someone out there, how do you get up the tree? Is it just a shimmy up the tree? Do you need to throw ropes up first? Is it a bit of a task because you obviously going up there and you're taking a firearm with you?
Yeah, so there's three main ways. Well, I guess if you include a tree stand, there's four ways. So your traditional tree stand hunting, which, you can still buy those, and a lot of people have them here in Australia and use them. And so you can get a fixed stand that's got like a ladder, and you would carry it out and set it all up and you climb up the ladder. The mobile tree stands are a bit more of they're still quite a big burden thing to carry in, but they are mobile. You carry them in, you clip them around the tree. They're a 2-piece system where you kind of stand up and then sit down and pull your legs up and stand up and sit down, and they lock onto the tree as they go up. And they're popular here. There's a Facebook group, an Australian Facebook group dedicated to the guys who hunt out of those. They work great. I mean, the only downside to them for me is you can't go past branches. So if there's a branch coming out of the side of the tree, the tree stand's not going to be able to go up past that because it's going to get in the way. You can only shoot in probably about 180 degrees position because you're sitting in the seat with your back to the tree. So there's only a certain amount of degrees that you can access and shoot. And also they're quite heavy and burdensome, so you wouldn't take them very far in the bush. So for me, the saddle hunting works because it's very mobile and it's lightweight. And so in the States, if you got on YouTube and type in saddle hunting, you'll find 4 million videos pop up. Very popular thing, as you say, for whitetail hunters over there. And there's three main ways that people get up the tree. The first and most popular way in America is using what they call sticks, which is interesting. I've never used them, so they obviously work because guys use them, but it just looks a bit cumbersome and not that safe to me. But basically what it is they carry in 4 different, if you imagine the capital letter I, it's a thing that they put against a tree. They wrap the cord around it to the tree and lock it down, and it effectively becomes 2 steps of a ladder that they've put on the tree, and they'll climb up that, and then they'll put another one up, and then they'll climb up that and put it. So they'll put 4 of them up, probably get themselves 20 or 30 feet the tree, and then they put the platform and they step up on. It's just a lot of stuff to carry around, and then to get back down again, you've got to climb down and reverse all of that. And personally, I don't feel that it's the safest way to do it because you're not really tethered into the tree very safely the whole time. You've kind of got a loose rope that you've got around the tree, but if you fall, you could still fall a little bit of a distance. So I'm not saying it doesn't work, and I'm not saying it's not good. I've never used it. I just saw a better option for me with my background in rope work. I was happy with it. So that's one way. The second way is what they call one sticking, which is kind of, you still climb up, similar sort of thing. It's a platform, I guess, with some steps underneath it. You strap it to the tree, you climb up, and then it has, if you imagine like a rope ladder, it's got like 2 rope ladder steps that hang below it. So you climb up the 2 steps and then up the step onto the platform, and then you tether yourself into the tree and you basically hang off the tree, and then they reach down below them, undo the one stick, and then they reach up and put it up above them, and then they climb up that set of steps again. And it's kind of similar to the way the sticks go up, but it's a little bit lighter weight when you're carrying it in because it's only one piece. And then when they get up there, they'll attach a rope to the tree to use as their tether. And when I say tether, that's what you're attached to the tree with. That's your safety line that goes to your harness. And all forms of saddle hunting will use a tether. So they'll go up, do that, then they'll do their hunt. And then when they want to come back down again, they'll just rappel down with a rappel device like an abseiler would use. So that's one sticking. So there's a few different options, and you can just get online and have a look at YouTube, and you'll see what they all look like. The method that I choose to use is what's called a single rope technique, or SRT. And basically it's just using, you effectively, what I do is I go out into an area that I know I'm going to want to hunt, and I sort of check the area out, do a bit of scouting. And normally what I do is I'll have this little bit of kit with me when I'm generally just stalking, hunting, because I don't just hunt out of the tree all the time. It's one of the possibilities that I can use. I spend a lot of time spot and stalk hunting like everyone else. But sometimes you'll find an area where you're like, oh my God, there's 5 different trails leading in here. It's a really nice little spot. There's a tree there. This could work. So what I'll do is, using a throw ball, like what an arborist, I don't know if you've ever seen an arborist throw a throw ball through a tree with a thin rope. So it's kind of like a string line, but it's stronger. Goes up and over a big branch, comes down, and then you hook your rope onto that and you pull it back through, so your rope ends up going up over the branch. So effectively doing that, I'll set just with some paracord, like you get at Bunnings, the 4mm paracord. I'll go out and I'll just put set lines up in the tree, so it'll go up and over the branch and back down again. And I'll just, with a small carabiner, leave it attached to the tree. And so in my local area, I've got probably 10 of those set up in different areas. So depending on the wind conditions, depending on the weather and that sort of thing, I'll choose to go, I'll know where my trees are. I've got them in my GPS. I go there and I just hook my rope on, pull it up into the tree. And then when that's attached up in the tree, I basically ascend the rope as a rock climber or an arborist might do, just with different bits of climbing equipment, and then set myself up in the tree. So that takes, I would say that's 15 minutes that might take me to do. I'll get up the tree, set my saddle, and then what I'll do is the main rope at the bottom of the tree will be tied to my backpack, and then the rope that I used to pull my rope up and through, I'll effectively have that attached to my rifle or my bow, and then I'll climb up. So when I'm up in the tree and I'm secure, I can pull the main rope and I'll pull my backpack up into the tree, and then I just attach that around the tree, and I basically put all the rest of the rope in there so you can't see it from the ground. And then with the other one, you'll pull up the rifle or the bow, pull all that up, and there's a special strap that goes around the tree with some hooks on it, and you just hook all the gear that you need up there. So from the ground, you can't see anything. And hopefully, like you say, hopefully your scent is blowing away from where you're hoping the deer will come from. And, if it's not very breezy at all, your scent normally doesn't sink too much. And I've certainly had a lot of animals that aren't deer underneath me, and they just don't know you're there. Like foxes, wombats, kangaroos, dogs, a lot of wild dogs come by and they just trot below you. It's pretty cool because you get in there early. Like if your golden hour is to hunt in the early evening, you get in there at say 3 o'clock. You get set up in the tree. You try and make as little noise as possible. You're always going to make a little bit of noise. And then you sort of give yourself an hour for the bush to settle back down again. And then it's as if you're not there.
I love the idea of it because we're coming into summer and it is getting warm. And as you said before, a bit crunchy underground. So I know even on the last hunt I was on, it was crunchy and makes it very hard to move around and do that spot and stalk. So I've just, as you're talking, I've got this new sort of sambar spot where it's got a lot of activity going on, some fantastic rubs and things like that. And it's not ideal because it's very closed. So it's really either thick native or it's pine, but it's not mature pine. So it's very, branchy, hard to see through, etc. But there's an absolute, plethora of stag sign and rubs everywhere. But unfortunately, up here in New South Wales on public land, saddle and tree stands are not allowed to be used. You can use a blind as far as I'm aware, which is quite interesting. And I've talked about that previously on the podcast, but using them is not allowed in public land. I'm guessing from a liability standpoint from New South Wales State Forests or the Department of Forestry that are in charge there. if you are listening and you want to see what we're talking about as well, jump over to YouTube and have a look on that. I'll put some photos up as we're talking about things as well. But, mate, it does make a lot of sense. A couple of questions for you, though. Like in a saddle, I know you were saying before that you climb up there and you're basically putting your feet on a branch and that's almost your, platform. How sturdy are you when taking a shot?
Okay, so putting my feet on the branch was that very first time when I didn't have much equipment. So I've since bought some stuff over from the States. So they have what they call a platform, and it's just a small metal platform, I guess is the basic way to think about it. And it attaches to the tree and it kind of locks itself in, and it's super stable. Like you can jump on the thing, it won't move. You can, the way it kind of ends up being, you've got the saddle or the harness on, and then you've got a thing called a bridge, which is attached to basically both sides of your hip on your harness. And the bridge then goes through a carabiner, and then that carabiner is attached to your line that's attached to the tree. And what it does is it gives you a central pendulum point, I guess you could think of it like. And what you can do is you can just literally move left and right, rock side to side around the arc of the tree with your feet against this little platform, and you can stand on the front of it or on the side of it and move right around. So I go up now with the bow and I can shoot literally 360 degrees around the tree and very stable. Once you get yourself positioned and you understand sort of how to lock yourself in and take your shot, you literally can go 360 degrees around the tree. So yeah, it's quite stable. They're quite lightweight. They're aluminium. Most of them, I think they're starting to make some carbon ones now, which is, it's a little bit. If you get on some of the American Facebook pages for saddle hunting, you will see that they're just gear geeks. It's out of control. Like they're like, oh, what brand of this have you got, and what brand? Like they're so into it because half the guys have just got no idea about rope or climbing equipment or anything like that. So it's just they see what someone's using, they have to have the exact same thing because they think it's the only safe thing. So it's definitely, if you're going to buy some equipment and have a go at doing this, it seems really confronting and difficult. But if you went to a rock climbing style shop or an arborist supply shop that sells rope and carabiners and ascending and descending devices, everything that they have you can use, and it's all rated to take 3-ton trucks. You could hang a car off my rope. It's strong, and it's only 8.9 mil thick, so it's lightweight. So that's the whole thing for me. The key is to be able to take all that gear in my backpack with me when I go out there, because the ultimate plan is to carry 40 kilos of meat back out as well. So I don't want to have some big tree stand that I'm lugging in there that weighs 20 kilos because I'm going to have to do 15 trips. So yeah, it's an option. And like you say, as it gets drier, I like it as an option. Obviously the deer don't move about as much when it's hot and dry like that. And that's definitely something to take into account. But areas where sambar like to hide is normally really thick, horrible blackberries and dogwood. And you just, like I quite often see people talking about sambar hunting and looking at, long range rifles and things like that. I've never seen a sambar more than 60 meters away from me. Like all the ones I've shot have been close range because I'm in thick bush and that's where I find them. So by being 10, 15, 20 feet up a tree, I'm above the blackberries and I'm above the dogwood. And so in that 360 degree arc that I think that I can hunt in, I can see down and into so much of that area that I would never see from the ground. And it just allows you, that better view. You can see deer from further away, because for such a massive animal, I don't know how they move so quietly. I've been up the tree and you're looking around, you're keeping an eye on everything, and then you'll hear a little stick break and you look around somewhere you haven't been checking, and the deer's only 20 meters away from you. And it's like, how did it get there without me hearing it? It's amazing.
No, I'm with you. From everything you're saying, it sounds like a totally different way. And that's something I'm all about, like just all new skill sets and learning different things. And it makes a lot of sense, especially deer hunting in thick country, because I talk about that all the time. When I go down a certain state forest, especially the ones that had the fires go through them, some of them are impenetrable. You sit there and go, you can't see more than a meter in, and that just isn't conducive to good hunting. So there definitely seems to be a place in it for hunting here in Australia. Why do you think the popularity is not as big as somewhere like the States? Do you think it's just because we hunt sort of different things? Most people that hunt deer also hunt pigs, so that's a totally different element again, because most people will do it on quads or with dogs or things like that. Is that a contributing factor? Because like, as much as there are people using it, it's definitely not what I would say a stronghold for the majority of deer hunters.
Yeah, I think there's a few factors in place. I think us Aussies like to do things our way, and the idea of doing something that the Yanks do, I think there's a percentage of that's like, oh, that's for hunting whitetail. We don't do that. But, guys have been tree hunting deer in Australia for a long time. If you draw a tag for hog deer, you quite often find yourself in a tree down there. The other thing too, I mean, look, at the moment, I would say it is cost prohibitive. If you were to get online and order a full saddle hunting setup from one of these US sites and then ship it all the way here, you're going to spend some money. And I mean, that's probably the most prohibitive thing. Guys are like, well, I've never tried it, and what am I going to do? Jump online and spend a couple of grand on all this gear, and I don't know if it's a good idea or not. So, yeah, look, my advice is you don't have to have all that gear. You don't have to have everything that is the saddle hunting tag names on it and all that sort of thing. You can buy any rope that a rock climber would use, as long as it's got a percentage of dynamic in it. You don't want a fully static rope, because any form of climbing, if you fall, you want the rope to have some dynamic stretch to take the shock out of it. So I mean, you don't need it very long. Like the rope that I use, I measured it this afternoon, and it's 14 meters long. So you could just go and buy 15, 20 meters of rope from a climbing shop, and you can buy it by the meter. You don't have to go and buy 100 meters. The things that I think you would need to buy, you could just try a rock climbing harness, or if you had a friend that's an arborist, you could borrow an arborist harness, anything like that. It won't be as comfortable as a saddle, and that's the biggest difference. The saddle, it's almost like a mini hammock that goes around your bum. So it's really, because these whitetail guys in the States, they'll get their first light and they'll be in that tree until dark at night. They do 12-hour sits. Now, that's not me. There's no way I could do that. It would drive me mental. But I'll sit up there for 4 or 5 hours, no problem, and super comfortable. Like you got to move around a little bit, keep the blood flowing, but they're quite comfortable. But you could do that you could get a $150 rock climbing harness and do it. It would be fine, even if it wasn't camouflage pattern. Like we're so wrapped up in hunting about having all the camo gear and all the right gear, but any bit of equipment like that, you could get up the tree, you could sit up there like I did the first time. I didn't spend a cent. I just borrowed a little bit of gear off an arborist friend, got up there and had a go. But yeah, there's basic stuff like that. As far as, there's a couple of YouTube channels that I'll recommend if people really want to have a look into doing this in the style that I do, which is the single rope technique. There's one, it's called New York Saddle Hunter, NY Saddle Hunter. And those guys have got like a system that they've put together, which is quite good. And then there's another one, which is called JRB Tree Climbing and Saddle Hunting, JRB. The guy's a really interesting character, but he's got really good information on his video. And he's just a freak and into knots. So he's all different sorts of prusik knots. He ties them and invents them and names them and does all sorts of things. But, if you think about, I use some equipment that I've bought that, is not super cheap, but you can just use rope, like a prusik rope to climb up with and do all that sort of stuff. And he shows some really good stuff on how to tie them very step by step. So you can lose many hours on his channel. So those ones are a good one to have a look at. And then just generally any saddle hunting one will show you a heap of information. But the biggest thing I think is don't look at it as the way you're going to be hunting. You look at it as it's another string in the bow. It's just if you're hunting an area and what you're trying to do is not working, maybe you've got a trophy stag you're trying to hunt, or you're just a meat hunter like me, but every time you go in there, you make too much noise and you spook the deer. Well, get in there before the deer get there, get up the tree, dead silence, let the bush come back alive. Even if you don't shoot a deer, it's an amazing nature experience, because as a bushwalker or a hunter, when you're moving, you don't see the bush come alive like it does when you're just sitting in a tree for hours not making any noise. Like, I've never seen a wombat feed before I was setting up a tree, and I had this wombat come out and he was just directly under my tree. I don't even know where he came from. He must have had a burrow in the blackberries nearby. All of a sudden I hear this noise and I thought, yeah, there's a deer. And I looked down and it's a wombat. And he spent 15 minutes just feeding on the grass below me on the ground. And it was amazing. I've never seen anything like it, And to me that day, I didn't even care if I shot a deer, and I didn't. But yeah, you see a lot of cool stuff out there, and you learn a lot more about the bush. But the other big thing, and we always talk about it, and I hear it when people are on podcasts, is about, if you're walking through the bush and you break a stick and then you think you've scared every deer in the forest away. Well, once you're sitting in that tree for an hour or two, you realize just how many birds are in the trees, breaking branches off and throwing them on the ground. And there's the amount of times you think there's a deer coming because you've heard a cracking noise on the ground, and it's just the birds knocking sticks on the ground, or a kangaroo's coming through. So yeah, you really get to see a lot of stuff that you don't normally even when you're hunting quietly. It's cool.
Yeah, look, I'm a big fan of camo, but I think in a different context, if you're trying to get close to an animal, you need your, outline broken up, where I suppose up in the tree stand, tree saddle, doesn't matter which one, your elevated platform is going to help out. You don't really need camouflage because you're not breaking up that silhouette, because if you're doing everything right, the deer's probably never ever going to look up and see you. So
look, they look around. They do have a look around.
Up as well?
Yeah, a little bit. But the thing you got to remember, like if you're on a sloping hill and you're in the tree, you're uphill from a deer on one side, but if the deer's on the other side, you might be at eye level.
Yeah.
So I'm not saying don't use camo, because trust me, everything I wear is camo, and a lot of guys have said to me, oh, you don't have to buy all that stuff. I'm like, well, I've got to buy a shirt. I might as well buy a camo one if I'm going to use it for hunting.
Yeah,
but
100%.
yeah, what I was getting at earlier is if you're just going to go out and give it a bit of a test drive, I wouldn't make that a game changer if you've got a blue harness, because, yeah, they don't look up all the time, but I wouldn't say that they're never going to look up.
Yeah. So what I was meaning by that is that if you're up high, that you're looking down on them, that also is going to change your trajectory of what you're shooting, whether it be with the rifle or the bow. How do you practice for that? Because that's one thing I talk about on the podcast. Unless you've got sort of private access where you can go and you can shoot on different angles and things like that, it's very hard to do if you just go to the standard range that, as I said, my local one, you need to have a front and back support for the rifle and it's bench rest only. That doesn't allow itself for you to practice in those different positions that we find ourselves in when out hunting. And then if you throw up this elevation as well, that's got to be a bit tricky, hasn't it?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, your shot angles become a huge factor, and so does your ranging and distancing, because you're not, a lot of guys, when you horizontally range something a distance and then you do that out of a tree down on an angle, obviously your distances are different as far as the trajectory of your arrow or your bullet. Bullet, probably not such a big deal, but certainly with an arrow. And most rangefinders now actually will put all that in for you. So you've sort of got to have an idea of how good your rangefinder is and whether it's doing all that for you. But and the same thing, there's a lot of videos online, especially in America, and a whitetail's deer's heart's in pretty much the same place as amber deer's heart's in. So the angles and the trajectories and the, quartering away, quartering to, all those sort of shots, and there's a lot of shots I just wouldn't take. I got a mate, and I think you might have seen the video on one of our pages. He filmed a deer, a sambar, and it walked in underneath him in the tree stand, literally directly underneath him. And I posted that on our Facebook page, and there were a lot of questions about, oh, how would you take that shot? And my answer was that I wouldn't take that shot. And personally, that deer would never have gotten within 30 meters of me. It would have been dead before it got there. I would have shot it the first time I saw it. And he was really lucky because it actually spooked. I think it caught a little bit of his scent. It spooked and ran. And this is what sambar do. Like, they'll run and they'll kind of do almost like a 360 degrees or 180 degree loop around you. And they'll try and sneak back in again to see what it is, because they really want to know what things is. They really check things out. So it came back around, and then he managed to shoot it at about 40 or 50 meters. So the video looks like it was right there, but in the end, he killed it further away. But yeah, I would never take a super steep shot from above. There's way too much stuff in the way of a clean kill. You know, for me, it'd want to be not broadside 100%, but, you know, at least quartering on. And and you've got to, like anything, I mean, if you're on a steep hill and you're just spot and stalk hiking along and you see a deer down in the gully and you take a shot on it, it's the same thing. You've got to think about, you're not trying to hit that spot on its leg where you normally would hit. You've got to think about, where's the heart in the body and where's the line from where I am to the heart, and you've got to make the shots as it goes that way. So there's certainly a bit to look at. And I'd say going up a tree, you want to be as low up a tree as you can be without being silhouetted and obvious. So I like to get up above the blackberries and the dogwood, but also I want to be fairly low and try and be like, I wouldn't pick a tree that's in the middle of a paddock on its own sort of thing, because you're going to be silhouetted. They're used to walking through that area. Something's going to stand out because it's different. It's the same with, if you build a ground blind, you're trying to just build it so it's not obvious. And if you can be in the tree where you're expecting the deer to come from this direction, so behind you, you want to have a bit of foliage. You want to have something that's breaking up your silhouette, and that helps. But yeah, certainly you don't get as high up a tree as you possibly can, because that just makes your shot harder for sure.
Well, that was the next one I was going to say is, you know, are there limiting factors? I'm guessing wind would definitely be one, moving you around. You know, that would make a shot even harder if you're in a tree that is swaying side to side as it goes. So do you sort of have any sort of set rules as, you know, diameter of a tree trunk and what kind of branches that you're going to sort of climb up and attach the rope to?
Yeah, I guess I've kind of just gone from what I knew from arborist work. So the guys I worked with, they would never trust a limb unless it was as thick as your arm kind of thing. And the way I set my rope up, what I'll do is when I throw the rope over a branch like that, I'm not just cinching the rope around that branch. What I'm doing is it's going around the main trunk, and that branch is stopping it from sliding down the tree, if that makes sense. So the branch is not taking all the weight of my body and the rope. The rope's actually going to choke itself around the main trunk, and then the branch that we've used is just there to stop the rope from sliding down the tree further. As far as the girth of a tree, I mean, it really depends, I guess, on the tree and the area you're in. Like, if you look around, there's a whole heap of trees that are snapped in half and broken over. I probably wouldn't climb any of them. So it's just something generally pretty solid. Like, for me, it'd want to be 250, 300 mil diameter at least. Also for the platform to sort of bite into and lock down properly. If it was too thin, it really wouldn't work. And it would also mean that my body would be really silhouetted, you know, way more because the tree's so skinny. As far as the wind situation, if it's blowing that hard, you're probably not going to find a deer anyway. They won't be out and about. They'll go and find the lee side of the hill where there's no wind, where it's quiet, because sambar deer, they just do not, every factor that can keep them safe they're going to use. And being able to hear a predator approach is their number one safety factor. And if they're in a really gusty, windy area, then they can't hear a predator, and so they won't be there. They'll be if you're standing in an area and it's blowing a gale, you may as well go home because there's not going to be a sambar deer there.
Yeah, I know Errol talks about the cone of silence and finding the area where exactly that, if it's blowing a gale, that you are, the animal's going to be where it's protected. So it's sense not getting blown around everywhere still, and it can hear. So it definitely makes sense. And it probably, I get what you're saying there about the, being in the tree. If it's windy too much, they're not going to be around. So you're not going to have that issue. Yeah, that sort of fascinates me. So what do you prefer up in the tree? Do you prefer the rifle or the bow? Is there a difference to each? Obviously, I know, distance, but we're talking about, you're saying that most of the deer you're getting are within 60 meters. Well, that's, definitely getting in that range of a bow.
Yeah. It's a catch-22. You don't want to be up the tree with a bow and there's your deer of a lifetime walks past you at 70 and you're like, God, if I had a rifle, I could have shot that. I guess it depends I think that's totally up to the hunter, like I'm a meat hunter. I'm going hunting to put meat in the freezer so that my wife and I can eat it. If a big stag walks past, it's going to get shot. If a small hind walks past, it's going to get shot. I'm not out there going, I'm going to let that one walk because I want him to grow a bit. Maybe, hopefully one day I'll be a successful enough hunter that I can start to do that. But to be honest, right now, if it's brown, it's down and it's going in my freezer. And that's kind of how I hunt. Having said that, let's say I go out tomorrow and I shoot a good size hind with my rifle and I've got it hanging in the fridge and I know we're good for meat for the next few months. I'm 100% taking my bow out because right now that's my new challenge. I've just gotten a bow in I've probably had it 3 or 4 months now, putting a lot of practice in. I wouldn't take a shot on a deer outside of 40 at the moment. The way my groupings are, I'd be confident to shoot something up to 40. And yeah, so basically I'll get up in the tree. If I've decided I'm going to take the bow out and go hunting, then I really will make sure that I'm in an area where I think there's a lot of chance of deer coming through set areas. And then when you get up there, obviously you got your rangefinder out and you just work out that tree's at 30, that tree's at 40. You try and memorize those distances so that, when one walks in, you don't want to be thinking about bringing up the rangefinder and doing all that sort of thing. You want to have a fair idea of what's in that little area because you're sitting there for a couple of hours. There's no excuse for not ranging everything within sight and having a good idea. And I run a single pin on my bow, so I normally have that set depending on the location I'm in, but I might have it set at 20 or 30. And then I just know that I can just lift or drop a small amount to make the same shot. And I practice all that. And when you were asking earlier about practicing shots from up in the tree, basically, look, I think what you do is you go for a hunting weekend and you take that gear with you and maybe when you're not, middle of the day, you might not be out actively hunting, I'd set up a target somewhere and I'd set up the thing in the tree and I'd climb up there and make those shots. And that's what I've done in the past. I've actually got a full-size sambar stag that I've cut out of a piece of plywood. And then right in that sort of whatever we want to call it, the dinner plate spot where we want to shoot, I then have a target that I just screw into it. And so I set that stag up 20 or 30 meters away. I'm up the tree. And with a bow, I'm actually taking shots into the target. I mean, you don't have to do that. You just have the target sitting on a chair. But, you certainly make the shots from up there and just practice stability because even with a rifle too, when I shot that first stag, that was the first time I'd ever fired the rifle out of a tree. And I honestly had no idea how stable it would be. And I was really surprised at how well it worked because I was able just to lean against the tree and use it as a rest. And it worked really, really well. But yeah, I mean, it is a case of practicing stuff and especially anyone that uses a bow and bow hunts, how much practice you do have to put in to be consistent. And then if you're going to start shooting out of a tree, then you've got to start shooting out of your saddle. And you don't necessarily have to have that right up a tree. I mean, you could have that set up 1 foot off the ground, but just the idea of being in the saddle, attached to the tether on the tree, standing on the platform, and being able to move around and take those shots is certainly something you need to practice.
Because you're also leaning back, aren't you? Like you're not just standing straight up, so you're at sort of a slight angle with at least your hips and your legs.
Yeah, depending on I mean, you really can change all that depending on how high you want to set up your tether and how long. So the tether's adjustable, so you can pull yourself in or you can lay yourself back. If you want to take a shot directly behind you, what you basically do is you pick that tether up and you put it over one shoulder and you duck in underneath it, so that all of a sudden that your back's to the tree, the tether's over your shoulder, which is stopping you from falling, and then you can take a shot with the bow facing 180 degrees away from the tree. So yeah, you can make all sorts of different shots. A lot of guys will have even knee pads, and then they'll sort of half sit in it and put their knees against the tree to rest. So there's lots of ways guys like to do it to be comfortable. I tend to just stand there. I don't tend to get sore legs or sore feet from it. I move around a little bit, but not too much.
So you said before one of the coolest things was watching a wombat sort of just feeding underneath you. Have you got any other things that you've witnessed and just gone, geez, that's cool? I don't think I would have seen that if I was just on the ground.
Yeah, heaps. So I had I was hunting. We had a mountain bike park in our area, and I was hunting not in the mountain bike park, but on the fringe on the other side of it. And it's an area where I haven't spent a lot of time. It's not really an area that you would spot and stalk hunt. It's very steep and it goes down into a big ravine area. So sort of sitting in the tree seemed like a good spot. And I know that between myself and two other mates, we've shot a heap of deer out of the trees in that area. It's worked out really well. But I was up there. It was getting right on that last light when you're just hoping something walks out. And I could hear this scurrying on a tree next to me. And I just thought it was another bird, because you get the birds all the time eating the bugs out of the bark. It's really cool. So I look around and there's this big brushy tail. And I'm like, what the hell is that? And it was a sugar glider. So it was one of those really small possums that's got the webbed skin out on its legs, the sugar gliders. We get them in this area. And yeah, I'd never seen one in the wild, and that was amazing. So I got to watch that for a couple of minutes before it got too dark. So that was a cool experience. I've certainly had wild dogs come down underneath, and that's interesting because they'll walk along and they'll pick up. A couple of times I've seen them. They'll pick up the scent of where you've walked in, and they'll scent the ground. Like they know something's not quite right, but they can't see you. They can't work it out, and they sort of hang around for a minute or two, and then they give up and they keep going. So it's interesting that they don't scent you up the tree, because obviously dogs have great scent. Kangaroos and wallabies you see a lot, and watching a wallaby come in, sort of start feeding, and then a couple of kangaroos come in, and they kind of muscle the wallabies out. They don't seem to share the same area very well, which I never knew. So I've witnessed that a lot. That's annoying when the kangaroos come in. You kind of hope that they just take off, because there's always broken sticks, and I don't think that you see deer and kangaroos hanging out a lot together. I think they tend to spook each other a little bit. So, but yeah, you see those wombat, things like that. So lots of birds. It's funny. I've always laughed at people that are bird watchers or birders, but just sitting up there for hours, you're kind of like, oh, what's that bird? And you're hearing all the different noises. Pretty cool. So yeah, definitely seen a lot of birds that I don't think I've seen before, which has been cool. But just generally enjoying the bush. It gets dead quiet when you go in there, because you're making enough noise that everything gets a bit quiet. And then within a half an hour, it's just like someone's turned up the volume again and the bush just comes alive. It's really, really nice.
Is it almost like meditation being up there? And like one of the things I really struggle with is being able to sit for a long period of time.
Yeah.
Now, so the whole being in the saddle, and when you were saying before 4 to 5 hours sitting up there, I was just like, oh my God, I don't know if I could do that. However, maybe I could if I was up in that tree, because you don't really have another option. When you're sitting on the ground, it's really easy just to go, all right, I'm going to keep moving. Whereas if you spent that time, and I think you said about 15 minutes to set everything up and get up that tree, then obviously I'm guessing it's roughly about the same time to get down, maybe a tad longer. So it's more of a commitment to stay up there. Is that sort of how you feel?
Yeah, I started off, when I first started doing it, I would take a book up there with me. And so just a novel, and I would just sit there and read the book. Read the book. And my theory was, if a deer comes in, I'm going to hear it crack, and then I'll just look up, put the book away, and then I'll shoot it. But I've definitely come to realize that deer can get in there without you hearing them. And same as bush stalking, in the tree, your best friend is your binoculars. And, I spend a lot of time glassing the area all around you. Recently, I was out up the tree and I'd glassed this area 20 times probably because I'd just been up there for ages. And out of the corner of my eye, I just saw a movement, and I brought the binos up again, and there's a hind had just got up out of its bed, turned around and sat back down again. That's what they do quite often, is they'll just change position to be comfortable. And that was the only time I saw it. I saw it for a split second, and I knew it was there, but I couldn't see it well enough to take a shot. But the fact is that there could be already deer there that you're just not seeing because they haven't moved. But yeah, they move so quietly. It really blows my mind that a 300 kilo animal with 4 hooves can come into an area that is got, cornflakes, leaves all around the joint, and they're so quiet. But yeah, I really try to not be looking at my phone, which you do. You sit up there on your phone and you might do whatever. But I wouldn't sit there and watch a video on my phone because you're going to miss an opportunity. And yeah, and there's a good chance that sitting up a tree for hours is not for everyone. Some people probably can't do that. And if you're really afraid of heights, it's probably not for you either. You got to be realistic about stuff. But yeah, the more attentive you can be, the better, because you're potentially going to miss seeing. You'll see a flick of an ear that, it's the same as any ground hunting. You don't walk around looking at your phone when you're bush hunting because you want to be able to see the antler move or the flick of the ear, and it's the same up the tree.
It does sound cool to get a different perspective and I guess remove yourself from the ground element to allow the bush to come alive and not be something that can be seen from down there as well. So I'm liking everything you're talking about and how it actually relates to hunting, and it could be something that I'm interested in going forward because, as you said, another string in the bow can never not help any hunter, I feel. So it's one of those good ones. And I can definitely see it lending itself to sambar hunting too because they're such a switched on animal. And it resonated exactly what you were saying there about these massive animals that can just blend so well and move so stealthily through the bush. And it's pretty impressive to see that they've been introduced here in Australia and how well they are doing on a foreign landscape. That, I know there's a lot of talk about them being feral and being an introduced species and destroying the landscape, et cetera, but you got to sort of step back sometimes and go, I'm actually super impressed at how well they've adapted and been able to flourish in our landscape. That has to count for something. And then, there's the argument of, well, what wasn't introduced as well? Like at some stage, when we're talking about megafauna and things like that have all died out, the animals that are here now weren't here on the landscape at some point in time. In our sort of span, they are. But yeah, it's very fascinating for me, that one. So, mate, I really appreciate you coming on and giving us a bit of a glimpse and an insight into what saddle hunting is, and especially here in Australia because it isn't as common per se. So you said you're on a Facebook group. I will put all the details and the links up there for people to have a look at. And if you want to jump on and check out the links, go for it. Some fantastic stuff there. That's how I found out and had a chat to Whips, is seeing what was on the Facebook group and some of the images. So always something to learn. And guys, I really hope you've enjoyed this episode, and mate, really appreciate you joining us. All right, guys, bye for now. You've been listening to the Australian Hunting and Beyond podcast with Matt. Thanks for tuning in and can't wait to catch you next time. But in the meantime, if you want more, you can find it at linktr.ee/Australian Hunting and Beyond. That will give you our YouTube, Instagram, X, Facebook, you name it. We'll catch you next time.